Hello. As I said before, my presentation is over age, race, class, and sex in Eternals. And in age, race, class, and sex, redefining difference, Audre Lorde speaks of a mythical norm. This mythical norm is defined as white, thin, male, young, and heterosexual. This mythical norm is an ideal projected by the media that is unattainable for most people. In my presentation, I will speak about the movie Eternals, with the first Asian director, a deaf superhero, and a black man kissing another black man. The film takes the viewers through each of the immortal characters and shows the audience how their race, age, class, and sex affect how other people perceive them. I will expand how Marvel does not want to conform to that same mythical norm anymore. My presentation will cover how Eternals teaches us valuable information of the fallacy of the mythical norm, and does so by offering diverse representations of interracial and gay relationships. And that is the thesis, and that is all the characters on the screen there in Eternals. And one of the main characters on the film, Phastos, a black, gay superhuman, finds hope in humanity and defies the mythical norm. And that's him on the screen. Prior to his newfound humanity, Phastos gives up on humans after the US drops an atom bomb on Hiroshima. The events of World War II leave Phastos with a hate towards humans. However, his perception of humanity changes after he begins a romantic relationship with his future husband. Phastos' love for humanity grows again when he and his husband adopt a child. Phastos' relationship, combined with his race, goes against the mythical norm. Lorde explains how society responds to difference by rejecting, loathing, and fearing it. One of Eternal's goals is to show us how even those who deviate from the mythical norm can indeed find happiness. Phastos finally finds a bright light in humanity because he stopped trying to conform to the mythical norm. Phastos learns that humans who destroy those who do not fit the mythical norm through Hiroshima, although Phastos may be taking a risk by having a gay husband, he does so because that was what makes him truly happy. The homosexual relationship Phastos partakes in is what gives him hope. Phastos learns to love humanity by deviating from the mythical norm and teaches the audience that they can find happiness from ideals outside the status quo. Isabel Painter expands deeper on the Asian population being trapped in the fiction white world created them and for American film by authoring her honors thesis, The Marginalization and Stereotyping of Asians in American Film. In her thesis, she speaks of an Asian stereotype of being a model minority, which means they are intelligent, hardworking, ambitious, but they do more harm than good. Although Asians had 3 positive traits, the marginalized community is still not able to break free of the confines of the perfect white world. Eternals does its best to give opportunity to Asians in the film. Eternals does a fantastic job adapting to societal change and gives opportunity to the minority populations who get overlooked when it comes to Hollywood casting. Offering diverse representations in the film is a step to breaking free of the mythical norm. There are few platforms that can touch homes and lives, such as films, and especially superhero movies with their popularity. And the popularity is only on the rise. There is no better way to adapt than to change and to bring diverse representations to the bedroom of children that will impact the future. Eternals defies the circumstances of the white center world with many diverse representations in the film, such as its actors and directors. Lorde speaks about how society needs to recognize difference. Lorde iterates that recognizing difference gives more opportunities to a variety of ethnicities and human beings on separate genders or orientation. Eternals not only has a Asian director named Chloe Zhao, but it has 4 Asian characters that have Asian descent in the film. These characters are Cersei, who's on the bottom left, and then Kingo, who's on the top left, and then Gilgamesh, who is on the bottom middle, and then Wong, who is on the bottom right. And the person on the top right is the director, Chloe Zhao. All these people are not of the idealized characteristics of society. And then the Asian hate around the world has been on the rise recently. Asian hate rose a whopping 73% since 2020. Eternals defies this by including the Asian actors and giving the Eternals director a chance at creating an exquisite movie. Eternals teaches the audience that coming from a different descent, other than Caucasian, is acceptable and people can still flourish. Eternals further defies the mythical norm by including the first deaf superhero, Makari, who is played by Lauren Ridloff. Ridloff was deaf at birth, so is a deaf person playing the superhero. It's not just like most movies where the deaf actor is being played by a hearing man or a hearing woman. Sarah Bauer writes, in the comics, Ridloff's character is a hulking, hearing white man. A lot of fans were angry when the character was announced to play the role. Eternals went as far to completely change the comic character just because the actor was talented and she was beautiful in a different way. Lorde writes, change means growth, and growth can be painful, but when we sharpen self-definition by exposing the self and work and struggle together with those whom we define different from ourselves, although sharing the same goals. Eternals promotes change by giving opportunity to those who are not of the imaginary accepted standard of society. Eternals looks at how different Ridloff was, but they did not misuse the difference. The misuse of her difference would be not interviewing the person just because when she was deaf. In fact, when Chloe Zhao interviewed Ridloff, she was only interested in who she was and her personality. She looked at the beautiful difference she had inside and outside of her. Comic book lovers who want to stick to the traditional society from moving past the mythical norm, creating diverse characters in superhero films. Irene Cruz writes, there's always a knee-jerk reaction. It's always like, oh my God, you're making him Asian? How dare you? You're making him black? Then you see the acting and you go, oh well, the spirit is there. He has been, says Augustine Entry with Reality Comics. He has been reading comics since he was 5 years old, and he says he's a purist at times, but when he comes to the characters, he enjoys the changes. Marvel is making a traditionally white superhero male into a deaf Mexican-American mixed with white African-American. This is widely controversial because of the population thinks comic book characters should be kept in the same way they were in the comics. Society thinking like that prohibits change and disables civilization from moving forward. Filmmakers should cast on actors based on what they control. Lorde writes, this is a very complex question, but I believe one of the reasons white women have such difficulty reading black women's work is because of their reluctance to see black women as women and different from themselves. The point Lorde is trying to make is that people do not want to see difference as a positive and only want to use it as a negative. The idea correlates to directors having a better idea who they are dealing with and the differences that make them special. Directors should judge actors on difference, however, directors need to be careful not to wrongly discriminate. Discriminating would be throwing someone aside just because they are a certain race, as African American or Asian. Differentiating would be pick someone over the other because they had a better acting capability. Eternals director Chloe Zhao does an extraordinary job separating two. She does not discriminate while capturing the full beauty of human difference in her film. There is an interracial couple in Eternals that completely shatters the idea of the ridiculous mythical norm. The tragic couple of Cersei and Icarus. It brought a white-Asian interracial relationship into a Marvel film. In other films, the audience saw superheroes dating the same race as theirs. Spider-Man: Homecoming also brought in an interracial relationship. However, this was the first between an Asian and a Caucasian. Marvel establishing that interracial relationships are acceptable for this showing and for its future films. Eternals makes people believe in the great qualities of difference. The film shows audience that this through the interracial relationship of Icarus and Cersei. It does not misuse difference when it is casting, and instead shows it how important it is in the film. That makes this work of art important because it establishes that people do not have to be the same race to love each other. Putting different races, cultures, and art in the mainstream media is the best way to move forward and help us recognize the beauty of someone's difference. An idea society should already be accustomed to, but the traditions of the old prohibit people from adapting and moving forward. Eternals helps younger people defy the mythical norm through its message how interracial relationships are normal and is no longer controversial. People need to appreciate how Marvel did not care about what their superheroes were in the comics. Eternals defies the status quo and establishes that the mythical norm is no longer existent in their films. It is a groundbreaking film that breaks free of the mythical norm that so many people have come to accept. The film recognizes difference but does not exclude people because of it. Zhao was be able to create a film that brings out the individual qualities of each of the different Eternals. The movie was able to show people that the accepted white norms is not what Marvel casts in the kind of film they write. It truly breaks free of the shackles of the mythical film. And that's it.
So Chad, in fairness, you are my student. We've worked together on this project. But today you said something that just finally was like an epiphany to me. You said that love for humanity grows as acceptance of difference grows. That's what you learned from this film. So thinking about that and how your argument has changed as you've worked on this paper, I would like you to talk about the process of adaptation in your work. How has your work changed from the time you wrote the paper to the time you presented on campus to the time that you presented here?
Okay. So I actually wrote this paper last semester as a rough draft at first, and then I submitted it and it got revised and everything, and I completely rewrote it again because it wasn't very good at first. And then I presented it at a seminar at Lee College, and it still wasn't really the best, and I got a whole bunch of comments back on it. And so I rewrote it again, but this time I took a different approach. When I was first writing it, I was arguing that difference should not be recognized and we should all be the same. But as I dug more deeper, I realized that difference is what makes us beautiful. And so I based my argument on that and basically rewrote the whole paper.
My question for Chad. I understand that when Eternals came out, there's a lot of negativity surrounding their idea because of how the way it's presented. How do you feel that by defying societal norms that the Eternals and Marvel itself have contributed to awareness? Or
so the thing about superhero films is that right now, if you look at the top 30 grossing films of all time, about 15 of them are going to be superhero films. And so by including these characters that make a difference or are different from the standard characters that we usually put in Marvel movies, even if the movie wasn't the best movie ever made, is a step in the right direction to recognizing difference and being more inclusive to members of society. So.
I had a quick question. Being less familiar with the film, did you do any particular research or have an understanding of whether Marvel did this with intention or not?
Yes, I did research that, and so I really didn't come up with much because Eternals really isn't a renowned film, but I did come up with Chloe Zhao, the deaf character she was interviewing. She had the character, she already had her in mind, she asked her to come for the interview and just hired her on the spot because she wanted to make a difference and show that it was okay to be deaf and not hearing.
Oh, okay. Chad, I'll ask mine. I guess the Eternals did not, for a Marvel movie, didn't do quite as well in the box office. And do you think that was because of its defying of these mythical norms, or do you think that had a part in it, or was it just because of other reasons in the...
Well, I do think that was the case because the movie was banned in different countries because of the the black man kissing the other black man, and countries who were against homosexuality, they banned the movie and they were not allowed to watch it. So I do think it played a big role, but you also have to think of the pandemic in terms of box office numbers. So, thanks.
I'll wait for Chad. So comparing Eternals to Black Panther, Eternals rewrote characters that were originally a different race as they casted them as a different race versus Black Panther, it was an originally black character. So did your research involve knowing the effect of recasting characters as different races versus making new characters that are already Asian or black or Muslim or?
I did not delve deep in that, but making a new character is the thing with that is that I know like people love the old comics. They love the typical Iron Man or Captain America. And Eternals wasn't the most popular comic books, but all their characters were white or they were of the mythical norm. So, I mean, the recasting or changing, I mean, like, I'm trying to think of like, MJ, for example, from Spider-Man Homecoming. She was a typical white, like, save me character, and then she got cast to Zendaya, who was a black character. So I do think the recasting of characters has a bigger effect than creation of all new characters.